Washington, D.C., before U.S. President Donald Trump decided to withdraw his country from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action (JCPOA) in May 2018, Djavad Zarif, Iran's foreign minister and the nuclear agreement's chief Iranian architect, was the most popular public figure in his country. A year after the withdrawal, a University of Maryland poll shows Zarif's popularity was far surpassed by that of General Qasem Soleimani, the hardline Revolutionary Guard commander who was just assassinated in Baghdad on Trump's order. The Soleimani assassination in U.S. Strategic Incoherence. Mark Wilson, Getty Images. Richard N. Haas. Following its targeted killing of Iran's second most powerful leader, the U.S. could well find itself with no alternative but to devote more military resources to the Middle East, a path that could lead to additional Iranian provocations. And that shift would occur at a time of growing challenges to U.S. interests elsewhere in the world. 38. Add to bookmarks. What does Soleimani's death change? Pool, press office of Iranian Supreme Leader, Anadolu Agency, Getty Images. Shlomo Ben-Ami. The targeted killing by the United States of one of Iran's top military leaders represents a significant symbolic defeat for the Iranian regime, but it does not augur all-out war. After all, Iran and the U.S. have already been at war for decades, and neither side has an interest in an uncontrolled military escalation now. 7. Add to bookmarks. PS. Commentators' predictions for 2020. PS. On point. Malta Muller, Getty Images. PS. Editors asked commentators to anticipate the events and trends to watch in major countries in the world. 4. Add to bookmarks. Trump says he authorized the drone strike that killed Soleimani to stop a war. It is far more likely that he has started one, or at least the march toward one. No leader can be expected to anticipate precisely the effects of their foreign policy decisions. But their expectations should be realistic, which means that they should be based on credible intelligence and a comprehensive understanding of the economic, political, historical, and cultural dynamics at work. When expectations are not realistic, the results are often disastrous. This was the case with U.S. President George W. Bush's 2003 invasion of Iraq, which, among other things, resulted in hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilian deaths. And it has been so with virtually all of Trump's foreign policy decisions, particularly with regard to Iran. Trump's first major mistake was withdrawing from the JCPOA. Iran had not violated the terms of the 2015 nuclear deal, and the other signatories remained committed to it as well. But Trump wanted more concessions from Iran's leaders, so he disregarded his country's commitments, reimposed sanctions, and pushed U.S. partners and allies to follow his lead. Maximum Pressure campaign was supposed to lead either to Iran's quick capitulation to exorbitant U.S. demands, as spelled out by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, or to economic collapse. In the latter case, Trump's hawkish advisors assured him, the restless and poverty-stricken Iranian public would reject hardliners like Soleimani and support the rise of a new leadership cadre that would bring peace and stability to the region. In 2018, John Bolton, then Trump's national security advisor, who had previously advocated bombing Iran into submission, told a group of Iranian exiles that they would be celebrating regime change before 2019. Subscribe now, subscribe today and get unlimited access to On Point, The Big Picture, the PS archive of more than 14,000 commentaries, and our annual magazine, for less than $2 a week. Subscribe. So confident was the Trump administration in its assessment that it seems never to have considered an alternative outcome. For example, it did not account for the possibility that Iran would respond to plummeting oil exports by increasing production. True, this is not the most obvious response, because it could dilute Iran's remaining export revenues. But Iranians need oil, too, and could not afford the skyrocketing prices of comparable imports. In November, protests against rising gas prices swept the country. The Trump administration surely did not anticipate that 2 years after the resumption of sanctions, Iran's economy would be showing signs of recovery. And yet, during the third quarter of 2019, employment rose by 3.3% year-on-year, and unemployment declined to a 7-year low. Clearly, the Trump administration badly misjudged Iran. But false beliefs about the country's circumstances extend far beyond the White House. A 2018 New York Times op-ed exemplifies the low standard of evidence for reports depicting Iran's economic and political fragility. The commentary claimed that, according to official sources, 40% of Iranians lived below the poverty line in 2015. But source to which that claim was hyperlinked led to an obscure Persian-language website that made no mention of any official report. Meanwhile, World Bank data show that the internationally comparable poverty rate in Iran for 2015 was 11%, around the same as in neighboring Turkey. To be sure, when that article was published, Iranians were protesting economic hardship. But protest does not equal revolution, let alone successful regime change, especially in a country with security forces willing and able to use extreme brutality to crush dissent, as they did to halt November's gas price protests. Yet observers should beware of the assumption that Iran's hardliners are holding on to power by sheer force. The University of Maryland poll showed widespread support not only for Soleimani, but also for another hardliner, Ibrahim Raisi, who heads Iran's judiciary. This is not difficult to understand. In the 2013 and 2017 elections, Iranians threw their support behind the moderate Zarif and President Hassan Rouhani, because they believed that a nuclear agreement would usher in a new era of peace and economic security. But even though those leaders managed to deliver the JCPOA, they were powerless to stop the U.S. from reneging on it. Iranians wanted stability and prosperity. Instead, they got more economic hardship and unpredictability, including U.S. calls for regime change. Given how poorly U.S.-sponsored regime change has gone for other countries in their neighborhood, many embraced Soleimani, who had successfully defended Iran's borders against Saddam Hussein in the 1980s, and, more recently, against the Islamic State. George Orwell famously warned that a false belief ultimately bumps up against solid reality, usually on a battlefield. Unfortunately, that seems increasingly likely to happen to the U.S. in Iran, and soon. Let's block ads. Why?